Are we live? Are we on? Hi, everybody. Brandon. Hi. How you doing? It's another episode of the After Buzz, and today is Wednesday, June 19th, just in case you forgot what today was. And so we got a lot of different things that we're going to talk about on today's After Buzz. We're going to talk about some Adam Sandler movies. I watched one over the weekend. It was pretty damn good. We're going to talk about something that happens on the show that we get questions about that kind of warrants an answer, and I'll answer that here. We'll also talk about some of the stuff that I'm reading right now because that was another thing that kind of got brought up on the in the Facebook chat today because we were talking about Stephen King a lot during the show today because we're doing a lot of that Maine accent that yeah, let me tell you, the boss from Bangor. So we'll get to that stuff because I'm actually reading a Stephen King book right now. We'll get to some Deadwood stuff. And then we are also going to get back into 12-year-old Brandon's journal, if you'll take a look at it. And one of the reasons why I've been posting this is these entries from this journal is a pretty eventful year for me, apparently, because a lot of different things happened. The big event that obviously I would get to in these journal entries is the death of my uncle. And so you kind of get to see how I dealt with all of that stuff leading up to it. But it's really interesting because coming up in these entries, I will have my birthday coming up. So you get to find out what I got for my birthday and what I liked that I got for my birthday. And then there's also the entry that we have here happens to do with getting literally punched out in a basketball game. Not punched out because I don't think I was knocked out. But yeah, getting punched to the point that I was probably concussed after that, but we'll get to that here at the end. So kicking things off on this episode of the AfterBuzz, I got to remind you guys, make sure that down below you are clicking the little like button. Make sure that you guys are subscribing. You're clicking the bell for the notifications, and if you can, share this. Put it on Facebook. Put it on Twitter. Put it out there in the world for people. And if you guys want, as always, here live, if you're in the YouTube chat, you are more than welcome to get involved in the conversation. You can make a comment, ask a question if you would like. But we'll get to all that stuff here coming up here in a bit. But first, I want to get into these Adam Sandler movies because he gets ragged on pretty big time, and rightfully so for some of the movies he's come out with recently. I tried watching that movie Ridiculous Six. That's the Western that he did. I can't get past the first 5 minutes because there's some scene where he's supposed to be like kicking somebody in the head, and it's so dumb. It's just there's no way around it. You can't get past it. Which is interesting because I'm one of those people that if you go into a movie knowing kind of what to expect, like it's an Adam Sandler movie, yeah, I know what I'm going to expect with this thing. You can lower your expectations or just expect something different, and maybe that will be met, and it wouldn't be too bad. And the main one I want to talk about is Murder Mystery that I watched over the weekend. It's the one with him and Jennifer Aniston. They're this couple from, I think it's New Jersey, or no, they're from New York, I believe. Because I think it's either Brooklyn or the Bronx that he works. And they go off on European vacation, and they end up in the middle of this big murder mystery. It wasn't a bad movie. It was pretty entertaining. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it to other people. I would just always put that caveat of you got to remember it is an Adam Sandler movie, so if you take it too seriously, obviously you're going to be disappointed. But going through some of his previous movies, there's a lot of stuff that he's put out that has not been all the greatest. I mean, you're looking at that movie Pixels. I never saw it. I heard that thing was awful. That was the one that had to do with, I believe, the video games were taking over the earth or something like that. But yeah, I heard That's My Boy was awful. Jack and Jill was awful. Just some really, really terrible movies that Adam Sandler has done. But Murder Mystery, I would recommend that. There's another one that he recently did called The Meyerowitz Stories. And I believe he's in that one with Dustin Hoffman. Not a bad movie. And it's interesting, Murder Mystery is designed more to be a comedy, whereas you can tell that the Meyerowitz Stories more of a drama. And Adam Sandler seems to do pretty good when it comes to dramas. Am I right? Producer Dave, people can't see you, so you have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. He's over there nodding his head. He's like, yeah. Like if you've ever seen Funny People, Funny People is a pretty good movie. That's the one with him and Seth Rogen. So he seems to do pretty good. When he's playing a more serious role, it's a more dramatic role, which is really interesting because it's not what made his career. Obviously, the stuff that made his career was the early stuff of, Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison and stuff like that. And people totally forget about Airheads. That's a highly underrated movie. Airheads is a fantastic movie. And what makes it even better now is if you remember, one of the main plot points of the movie Airheads was that they were going to flip this classic, I don't want to say classic rock, but it was this vintage rock radio station to like an easy listening station. And I've been through that. I went through that in Florida. That's what happened back in 2010 was we went overnight, or no, it wasn't overnight because we went from a rock station to a Christmas station because it happened in late October or November or something like that. And then when they did that, once the Christmas season was over, they flipped it over to an easy listening station. Still there, still thriving. Like they're still doing good. So good on them for doing that, man. But I've been through it and it sucks having your station flip on you. But if you guys get a chance to check out Murder Mystery, by all means, go check it out. Fern Dog saying that he liked the recent Saturday Night Live that he did. I was impressed with that as well. Like I saw some of the clips. It was pretty cool watching Adam Sandler on Saturday Night Live again. Moving on to the next topic. This one has more to do with the morning show. And it's something that people have brought up a few times in the Facebook chat. And I figured that I don't think I've brought this up before, but producer Dave, let me know if this is something I have discussed. I'll keep it nice and short. But it has to do with Buzz getting cut off on the air. Like there's certain moments when he's still talking and then the next thing starts playing and it cuts him off and he keeps rambling his sentence underneath the next thing that's playing. And what happens with those are specifically timed to be 90 seconds long. And what that is that's when we're on locally here in El Paso. Now, if you don't know this, we're a syndicated morning show, which means we're in El Paso, San Angelo, and Abilene. And for the most part, from 5 to 9, the show is on the network portion, which means it's broadcast to all 3 different cities. But at these times, you'll hear them at around 15 after and about the top of the hour are the 2 times you'll hear these things. They're 90 seconds long. They come right after commercials, and it's when we're broadcasting to only El Paso. As far as the other markets are concerned, these things don't happen except when he continues to talk and, we've linked back up. Because what happens is everything needs to be timed out almost perfectly. So when we go into commercials, there's a button that I hit on my board, and that basically says to the other 2 stations, play your commercials now, because obviously they're not going to play our commercials in San Angelo because they don't care about things here in El Paso. So they have their own separate sets of commercials. So after I hit this button, the timer starts. We have this much time where we do our stuff, and then they have much time to do their stuff. And what they do is they play a set of commercials, and then they play a song. Like they actually have music still during the morning show. But when we're coming out, there's a reason that thing's timed out to 90 seconds. Because once that 90 seconds is up, that's when they should be done and they link back up with us and they're broadcasting our signal. And in case you didn't know this, Buzz has a problem reading clocks. And there's truly a screen right here to his left that has a timer on it that will tell him. And I get in his ear and let him know like 30 and 10 to let him know there's 30 seconds left and 10 seconds left, just so he can kind of whatever topic he's talking about right there, he knows, okay, so I need to, I got to skip some of this stuff because it's running too long, or I got to fill here because, this is only going to take 10 seconds and I got to fill 30, so on and so forth. But one of the problems that he'll do is that he'll try to squeeze too much in at the end. So I'll be in the, hit the little talk back button, I'm like 10, and he'll either start a new topic or he'll do something else and he runs out of time. And people always complain and like, why do you guys keep cutting Buzz off? It's not us. It's him not being able to read the clock. He's the one that's not paying attention to how much time he has left. It's not like we can just stop that clock and pause everything and make sure these other 2 stations are just, wait it out. No, like it needs to be done at this certain point, and then he keeps carrying over. This is something that was even brought up in our meetings because he was like, I don't see why you need to turn it up so loud and why you need to cut me off like that. Because he's only thinking here locally of what you hear here. He's not thinking about what you hear in these other stations, in these other markets. And what you hear then is they come out of commercials or they're coming out of a song, and then you hear the tail end of him talking about, whatever a sponsorship or something is. And so you hear this little like weird rambling, and then boom, the next piece of imaging goes in that's supposed to reintroduce us back into the network. But the first thing you heard was him trying to get through stuff while it's playing over him. So that's why he gets cut off in those moments is because that's an exact time. Like he needs to be done here, and unfortunately, he'll carry it over a little bit too long sometimes. Uh, anyway, is that a good explanation? Does that make sense there, producer Dave?
Total sense. Yeah,
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Because he still doesn't get it. We've been doing this for 4 years. But anyway, so next topic here, something that kind of got brought up on the Facebook chat today, and we were talking about it on the show, Stephen King books. And it was really because we kind of kept doing the, which was the main accent, which was hilarious when we were first doing it, because there was a few weeks ago we were talking about the sexiest accents in the United States. And Maine was somewhere on the list. I don't remember if it was the top, bottom, or whatever. And I had never really related a Maine accent. And that's when Buzz kind of explained the whole kind of a thing with the being of the Maine accent. And it was hilarious because the way he described it, he was imitating it. And then he went right into a clip from the original Pet Sematary, and it was spot on. Like he did the whole thing, and the first words out of the dude's mouth are and it just, the whole cast on the show just erupted in laughter because it was hilarious. But yeah, so we kind of got on the topic of Stephen King, and people were talking about good Stephen King books, bad Stephen King books, good conversions to movies, because one of the things that we were on the topic of was The Shining, because they've got Dr. Sleep coming out starring Ewan McGregor, which is the sequel to The Shining. Buzz has read the sequel, so he kind of wanted to give some insights on it. And Stephen King was not a fan of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. He didn't like it, which is why he ended up doing a TV series. I guess it was a mini series, because I think it was 3 episodes long, which is why he ended up doing one later. But for me, I've never read The Shining, but the movie's brilliant. Like I think the movie's fantastic. But there's certainly been some hits or misses. But when you're producing so many different, books and stuff like that, like how does Stephen King write that damn much? Like look at how many books that dude's done. Like it's insane the amount that guy writes. But the one that I happen to be that I happen to be working or reading now, I should say, and I'm still really early on. I'm only on like page 50 or something like that, but it's called Finders Keepers. It's been pretty good, and it actually jumps between a couple of different timelines, where it's got one timeline that's happening, I believe, in the 70s, and another one that's happening in like 2009, 2010. So one chapter will be past, next chapter will be future, and then so on and so forth. So it's been pretty good so far. So I can't officially say how it's good, because it could come, completely unraveling at the end. But if you guys want to read Finders Keepers with me, we'll start a book club. We'll start a Stephen King book club, or it doesn't have to be Stephen King per se, because maybe we want to branch out. But if you guys want to, check out Finders Keepers, go pick it up, and we can talk about it. The other stuff that I'm reading as far as comics are concerned, Kevin, my boss, he'll go to the comic shop, he buys some comics up, and then when he's done with them, just so they don't take up space, he gives them to me. That's how I've ended up with a ton of Batman comics, which is great. It's the War of the Realms, which is okay, I guess. Haven't really been able to dive into it too much. I just wrapped up one portion of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which was the new comics that were coming out with in 2017, and it totally is proving me right. Remember my theory for the Avengers and for Guardians of the Galaxy, and what happened with Gamora is that a piece of her is still in the Soul Stone. That's the whole plot line for what they did in 2017, is that she keeps having these weird kind of flashbacks where she's following this old lady. Spoiler alert, by the way, in case you haven't read it yet. It turns out that the old lady is her aged, and it's a piece of her in the Soul Stone, and she actually goes to Doctor Strange to try to figure out, is this just a weird vision, or is this true? Like, is there a piece of me in the Soul Stone? Well, guess what? There's a piece of her in the Soul Stone. I'm like, dude, as I'm reading it, I'm like, yeah, like I knew this, man. I knew this. Now, whether or not they choose to do that for the movies, that's completely up in the air. They could completely flip that thing on its head if they wanted to. But I'm still sticking by my theory that in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I hope Thor is still there. I kind of hope they do that as Guardians of the Galaxy, where they keep Thor around. Even if he's in it for just a little bit, I think it would be great. But I think that the other thing that they're going to do is that they're going to be in search of Gamora, and they're going to find out that even though, because technically at the end of Endgame, the Infinity Stones are gone. Because remember, in that timeline, Captain America takes them back, and he puts them all back where they got them from, because the whole point was that Thanos ends up snapping them out of existence, and then he ends up dying. God, I hate timeline theories sometimes because it's just a pain in the ass. But they're gone. Is what I'm trying to get at here. And so it ends up being that they aren't technically gone, because they even explain that in these Guardians of the Galaxy comic books. You can't get rid of them. You can't just, like, if these things like disappear, like truly disappear, our existence disappears. You can't completely get rid of the Infinity Stones. Which, by the way, I still rock my bracelet that Buzz. Here, you want to get a zoom in on that one? I can't see. Where are we at here? Hold on. That work for you? Yeah. So this was. That's fine. Um, so I still wear it because originally I just wore it kind of as goof, and then it bugged my wife where she's like, "I can't believe you're such a nerd and a child, by the way, for wearing a bracelet with the Infinity Gauntlet on it." And my kid loved it, so I was like, "Boom, I'm gonna wear it. This is great." And somebody they noticed it when I was at Texas Roadhouse a few weeks ago. One of the guys at the pro was like, "Is that supposed to be the Infinity Gauntlet?" I was like, "Yes, yes it is." He's like, "Oh, it's so cool," and I'm like, "I know, I know." So I got to go tell my, I'm like, "Dude, that guy totally recognized it." And she's like, like big eye roll. Like, I think she's starting to question marrying me just because I think she thought the whole nerd childish thing was a phase, or that she could kind of, work it out of me a little bit. It's not going anywhere. And she's starting to think like, crap, I can't believe that, like, no, so our kid will grow up. Like, she'll eventually grow old. I'm not. And I don't think that she realized that. So it's pretty funny goofing around with my wife on that aspect, though. All right, next topic here. That will. Go. Frank Sharples is back saying that Nova gets introduced in Guardians 3. That would be pretty dope too. The Nova Corps, obviously a big storyline in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies already because of Xandar and everything else. But that's also the comic books. The Nova Corps and stuff is another kind of big plot line for it. Next topic here that we'll move on to has to do with Deadwood, which I've noticed season 2 is a lot slower and a lot more difficult to get through than season 1 was. Season 1 was one of those series that, man, once an episode was over, I'm like, I'm moving to the next one. I'm moving to the next one. I was trying to gobble up as much Deadwood as I possibly could. And I think one of the reasons that it became so difficult with Deadwood season 2 is they kind of take Ian McShane out of it, because the season starts with this huge fight between Ian McShane characters and Timothy Olyphant's character, which is Al Swearingen and Seth Bullock. And I mean, like, to the point where they're up on the second floor, they roll over the top of a balcony, land in the mud on the second, and they both just beat the ever-living snot out of each other. But then, as he's recuperating, his eyes all messed up, and he's recuperating from all of these injuries. I think he had like a broken rib or something. He ends up getting, I believe, kidney stones. And it's to the point the doctor's ready to do surgery, and then they make him pass him on his own. And the doctor believes that he has like a mini stroke or something like that because of the force of trying to pass this kidney stone. And I think that that's one of the big reasons why this one has been so difficult to kind of get through, is because they took him almost completely out. Oh, and another thing that's really weird about season 2 of Deadwood, and I know this is totally cutting edge for you guys that I'm talking about a show that's like 15 years old, but they brought, so Seth Bullock, which is Timothy Olyphant's character, he starts hooking up with this other chick. Like, they always kind of like making the googly eyes at each other and stuff. Then they finally hook up, but he's married. But his wife is his brother's wife, or widow, I should say, because his brother died in the war. And so he marries the wife to take care of her and his child. And it's super awkward, like, anytime they're around. And it's what's her face that played Skylar in Breaking Bad. And I still have a bad taste in my mouth from her in Breaking Bad, and just how, but give the actress credit. Like, she's a brilliant actress. But man, it's like, dude, you're such a bitch. So really quickly here before I get back to the Deadwood stuff, Ferndog saying that you don't stop being a kid just because you grow old. We grow old because we stop being a kid. I guess that's kind of true. And then Frank is saying that just think if they had Viagra back in the day, then no Deadwood. Waka waka. Look at Frank hitting the one-liners, baby. Love it. All right. So anyway, So I got a few things here, and it's one thing I kind of want to start doing here on the AfterBuzz is doing kind of like a Today I Learned segment, which I think would be kind of cool, like maybe a little education. And I started to look into it because Deadwood's based on a real town and real characters. For the most part, they're real characters. Al Swearingen was a real guy. Seth Bullock was a real guy. A lot of the main ones are based on real people. There are a few that they kind of either took a story that had been made famous in Deadwood and created a character out of it, or merged a couple of characters together and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's reality. And obviously, sensationalized reality. And here's a couple of the things that I found interesting. I found an article on Mental Floss about 25 things that you might not know about Deadwood. One of them was, and this is obviously the series has ended and everything else, that if the series hadn't been canceled. Now again, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know if this actually happens or not. But the gem would have burned down. Now the gem is the kind of bar slash whorehouse that Al Swearingen runs. And it says here that assuming they would have continued to follow the path of the real Swearingen, it's likely that it would have burned down. But Swearingen ended up building it bigger and better than before, only to have it burned down again 20 years later. Like, seriously, that happened. A couple other notes here on Deadwood. So you notice, did you ever watch Deadwood there, Producer Dave?
No.
Okay, have you heard that? It's like just really horrible swear words.
Okay.
Like it's constant. Like the one big one is it rhymes with sock tucker. Okay. is the word, and it's used all the time. Like they have this one alley that's got of Asians down the street, and the one guy doesn't speak English, but that's the one word he knows, and he's trying to relay this message about how this one guy killed one of his guys, and he's talking about how it's two sock tuckers that he needs to get after because they killed one of his guys. But that's the word they use constantly. And it's true that they did have pretty foul mouths back in the day. The only problem is curse words hadn't quite evolved into what they are now. And so they were using tarnation, gall darn, and stuff like that. And when they were making the show, they realized that's not going to have the same desired effect. The point is to have the effect of, man, these guys talk with potty mouths. So they switched from the tarnation and gall darn to, the F-bombs and the S-bombs and the sock tuckers and all the other stuff. And then the next part of this here is talking about just how many F-bombs have been dropped in Deadwood. All in all, throughout the entire series, again, this is not including the movie. How many times do you think, so I believe it's 10 episodes per season, hour-long episodes. How many F-bombs do you think they could drop in that amount of time?
Over the course of 2 seasons?
Three seasons. So you're looking at about 30 hours.
Okay.
Because it's about an hour-long episode, 30 total episodes. How many F-bombs?
753.
You are not even close. 2,980 were dropped in this. So if you want to round that up to 3,000, that's 1,000 per season. So that's 100 per episode. Like that's how many F-bombs they're doing. And they get a lot of them out of the way at certain points because if somebody's really mad, they just drop like 6 F-bombs in a row. But it's talking about how, so that's the amount of use. Now, it leads in the category of most in that aspect, but as far as per minute or something like that, Wolf of Wall Street has more F-bombs than Deadwood does. Because when you want to break it down per minute, Deadwood has 1.56 F-bombs per minute. But Wolf of Wall Street, 3.16.
Wow.
So you're looking at double the amount of F-bombs in this, for Wolf of Wall Street comparatively to Deadwood. And then, which brings me to the final point here for Deadwood. Timothy Oliphant's mom, not a fan of the series at all, by the way.
Because of the curse words?
Yeah. So it gets right here where it says, and I'm reading this directly off of the Mental Floss article. It says, when her son was first cast as Deadwood's reluctant sheriff, Seth Bullock, Mrs. Oliphant was thrilled her boy would be in a Western. Then she saw the first episode and was turned off by all the violence and coarse language. She said, I told all the ladies at church you were finally going to be in something they could watch. And now I've got to call them all back, is what she ended up telling her son about the show. Which obviously, if you've seen the show, you know that it's cursing left and right, and it's nonstop. But yeah, so if you guys haven't seen Deadwood, I recommend it. Season 2 slogs on a lot slower, man, than season 1 does. Hopefully it starts to pick up, and I truly think it's because they kind of have taken Ian McShane's character, Al Swearingen, out a little bit. I mean, he's still in the show, but he doesn't talk. Like, there's one point where this was maybe in episode 2 or 3. He's locked himself in his room, and they all think he's just in there sleeping it off. He's passed out on the floor because of the pain from like kidney stones. So I mean, obviously that sucks. There you go. Frank Sharple says you should hear how many f-bombs I dropped during a Tampa Bay Bucks football game, rivals Deadwood. Let's see, that's your problem, is that you're expecting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be good, which is why you have to end up dropping so many f-bombs. Now, if you're talking about a possible Florida State game, they actually are good. I would think that would see more to Florida State game because that's a team that has high expectations, and if they don't play to those expectations, you would get more f-bombs than normal. But anyway, final topic of today. So if you guys have anything that you guys want to bring up, now's the time to do it. Go ahead and jump in the old YouTube chat right there. Questions, comments, whatever. If it's about the show, if it's about this here on the AfterBuzz, it could be something completely random. I really don't care. Fern Dog says, Scarface, try counting those. Yeah, there's just some movies out there, man, that are just brutal when it comes to the cursing. We brought that up on the show today when we were talking about Eastbound and Down. That's a show I could not get into because to me, it just came off as Danny McBride cursing. Like, that's all it was. I didn't really find it entertaining. I thought he came off as just a jackass that was cursing. Like, that was it. So anyway, final thing we're going to do today is we're going to read a little entry from 12-year-old Brandon's journal here. And the interesting thing, so it's about to switch over because it's 12-year-old Brandon about to become 13-year-old Brandon. And this is one of those big things too. And I'm really glad that my mom kept this because there's a lot of crap that I forgot about, that would happen back then. And then also, this being a truly, eventful year, I guess, in my life. So this one here, it says, Dear Journal, this last weekend, my basketball team had its last regular season game. Oh, and by the way, this one has not been put up as a blog yet. This is one of the ones that's coming up. And it was our first away game. The referees stunk. In the third quarter, someone was shooting a free throw, and I blocked a guy out. He got mad and pushed me, so I pushed him back. Then he grabbed my arms. I remember that too. Like, he handcuffed me. Like, this kid was a lot bigger than me, and you'll be able to see just how small I was when I describe how big this kid is. Because, I mean, at this point, I'm probably 5'1", not even 100 pounds. Like, I was rail thin. Like, I was a bag of skin and bones, man. Oh, look at that. We got, you can say that. You need to. No, see, this is what producer Dave doesn't understand, man. Like, he's being too polite here. Like, he needs to be able to chime in. But he looked it up, and so he found that Scarface has 218 F-bombs in 170 minutes. So maybe we'll do the math on that later. But anyway, so back to this journal here. So we have, where were we at here? Okay, he got mad and pushed me, so I pushed him back. Then he grabbed my arms, and truly, like, I just remember, like, he like had me handcuffed like this with both of his hands. Like, he grabbed my wrist and held me. He got even more mad and punched me in the eye. I have a slight bruise around my eye and a huge bump on my forehead because that's the thing. This kid was so much taller than me. When he went to punch me, he missed my eye. He hit me up here on the forehead, so it was kind of bruised here, and there was a huge lump on my forehead. This kid was big. He was around 5'10", and I would bet about 150 pounds. So start doing the math in your head there. To me, at this age, 5'10", 150 pounds was a giant. So I was a tiny little dude, man. Later that day, my dad called the lady who runs the club we had played. She told me during the game that he had been suspended from the club for 1 week and wouldn't play in their next game. The reason my dad had called is because he didn't like the results. Because, I mean, truly, like, it was, this kid sucker punched me, and it was really just like, oh, we'll just sit him for the rest of this game. Is really where they left it at. But he told the lady how he felt in a not so nice way. I remember listening to that phone conversation. My dad was pissed. He's cursing the lady out. My dad's a force to be reckoned with. Like when he gets going, man. So my dad said the reason the lady was nice to me was because she didn't want a lawsuit on her hands. This is also, he is also going to write a letter to the head of the Portland Metropolitan Youth Boys and Girls Clubs, showing his disapproval of the referees, the way they handled the game, the kid who punched me, and the situation. I don't think anything happened of it, though. I mean, I don't know if he wrote the letter or anything. I don't know if he eventually cooled down and was like, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was, it got busted my head, and it's going to go into like this. Nah, it could have been my first concussion at this point, but I probably had a concussion. The other team's coach didn't even say anything to the kids. Even the referees didn't say anything. The last time we had played them, there was a lot of pushing and shoving. The kid that had punched me didn't play the first time we had played them. I take it back. I think this one is transcribed as a blog up at buzzadamshow.com. So if you want to read it, you can. Yesterday in math, I almost fell asleep. My head hurts so much. That's when I'm reading this now. I'm like, Jesus, like that's like concussion symptom right there. That I'm almost dozing off because my head hurts so much. And that's one of the things too that does concern me a little bit because I've smacked my head so many stinking times. There was it would have been the summer right after. Oh crap! This would have been like back-to-back concussions then almost within like a few months period. Because this is in March. Later that summer, because it was the summer between 7th and 8th grade, we were in a baseball tournament, and I leaned into a pitch. I took it right in the ear, and it knocked me out. I don't remember anything, but I guess when it knocked me out, it actually it crumbled me. Those like the little giraffe things, and you put your hands up, if you push your thumb on the bottom button, they flop down like that. You know those things? That's how I fell after I took this pitch in the ear. The only problem is I fell on top of my head, and they thought I broke my neck. So the only thing I remember was the pitch coming in, and then waking up and looking up and seeing like my dad, my coach, and a couple of the other players like standing around me like that, looking down on me. And then I had to wait because I thought I broke my neck, blah, 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 blah. And then like an ambulance showed up. They carted me off in a stretcher and all that fun stuff. Fortunately, nothing was wrong with it. It was just like a sprained neck. They took x-rays and stuff. So I was able to make it back. I think before the game was over. But yeah, so there you go. So massive head injuries. If you ever want to know what's wrong with me, massive head injuries. Because that's not the only time I took a pitch in the head. Like that happened more than a few times in my baseball career. So anyway, I got the hair thing where I almost fell asleep because my head hurt so much. After the game, I took an aspirin. A couple hours later, I took another. So that was one of the kind of big events there. That had happened during, 12-year-old Brandon's life of playing basketball and stuff. And the one thing I totally forgot too while I'm transcribing these things is I was on like 2 or 3 different teams. Man, my parents were carting me around everywhere for basketball, baseball, and soccer, man. We had so many games over the weekends. That's all our weekends consisted of. Now I know why my sister was constantly so pissed off because our whole schedule was wrapped around my sports and she just kind of got drug along for everything. So I apologize, but hey, it was fun playing all those games. Did you play a lot of sports growing up there, Producer Dave?
Yeah, since I was 4, soccer, baseball, football, everything.
All kind of the main stuff. How old did you go up until like certain sports? Like did you play all the way through high school or
all the way through high school? Well, through my junior year in high school, I got injured. I sprained an ankle, well, fractured it pretty much, and that kind of ended my sports career. I didn't play my senior year, yeah, but up through my junior year. Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Which sports did you play through high school? All the same ones, or did you just
baseball.
have like one?
Pretty much baseball. I stopped playing football like my freshman year. Soccer my freshman year pretty much, and then just stuck with baseball at that point.
Okay, because for me it was young age. You got t-ball, soccer.
Mm-hmm.
I think I started basketball when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. I think played all of those through middle school.
Okay,
and then once high school started, I was like, I loved basketball, but I was like, I like to just play on my own. Like I don't want to have to go through all the practices and stuff.
No.
So I bogued out on that. I did play soccer. I think I talked about this on the AfterBuzz. When I was a freshman, I originally wasn't going to play soccer in high school, but they didn't have enough players for the team. So I got phone calls from all my friends that I played soccer with, like, dude, we need you. Like, we don't have enough players to field a team right now. We don't even have 11 kids for this freshman team. So I went and played. Only problem is everybody did that, and they did like this kind of mass call up to, if anybody wants to play soccer, please come do it. So then we had too many kids on the team. So we ended up with like 25 kids or something like that. But the cool thing was, at least for me, I was the only one that played every minute of every game because everybody else had to be swapped out because there was too many kids. But our coach was like, "You're our sweeper, like the last line of defense before the goalie." So that's the position that I played in soccer, and I was pretty damn good at it. I kind of wish I would have stuck with soccer.
Same position I played too.
But then I ended up, I played football for the 1 year when I was a sophomore, and I was too skinny. I was too much of a wimp. Like, I'm just, I wasn't good at it. When it came to actual padded football, no. Now, when it came to backyard tackle football, I was the shit. Like, there's a buddy of mine named Greg who he would play quarterback. I would play wide receiver. And it got to the point where the other kids in the neighborhood, they're like, you guys can't be on the same team because he and I were so in sync with each other. I would know exactly where to go, and he could just heave the ball up, and I would go get it, and we'd score a touchdown every single time. And it was to the point where, like, don't do it. So that's why I ended up trying out for football. But I ended up playing cornerback. I wasn't really good. Like, I started, but I think it's just because, the guys that didn't start weren't athletically inclined, where at least I had some athleticism, even though I was just a rack of bones still at that point. But yeah, so I ended up doing football, and then it was between sophomore and junior year was when I had the shoulder surgery, and that kind of put the kibosh on everything else. Although I did come back and play baseball, but I was never the same. Like, I did really well in baseball freshman and sophomore year. I hit the snot out of the ball. I had a cannon for an arm. I was doing really good, and then that shoulder surgery just kind of derailed that whole thing. So now here I am, a 39-year-old man training in kickboxing, which is a really brilliant idea when clearly I've already had a lot of concussions in my life from this kid punching me in the face and taking pitches to the ear. But it's still a ton of fun. And that's something I want to remind here before we wrap things up. Again, if there's anything you guys want to talk about, if there's anything that you guys just want to mention really quick, do so in the YouTube chat. But I need to get back into the thing that's been difficult is trying to figure out the pay-per-views and stuff, and when I want to bring Isaac or even Wreck-It Randy in to do an MMA talk. And because ESPN owns the rights to UFC at this point, which I kind of feel like getting ESPN Plus. It's like $5 a month. That's it, and you get so much cool because it's kind of it's the sports that I enjoy watching. It's soccer, it's mixed martial arts, it's these other sports that you can watch live on ESPN Plus. So I've kind of thought about doing that. But coming up here, we will get another MMA talk going on with Isaac and Wreck-It Randy. But on that note, producer Dave, got anything to chime in with there, buddy?
No, how was your Father's Day weekend?
I was pretty good. Got to relax. Didn't do a whole lot. Wasn't feeling the greatest on Sunday, which is why I didn't go with the family. And my wife was like, she's like, I want to go see my dad. I'm like, go. Like, I'll be fine. Like, I'll sit here and hang out and go hang out with your family. So I guess they had a really good time hanging out with the family over there. So if anybody from the family's watching this, I'm sorry I missed you guys on Sunday. I'll see you next time. And how was your Father's Day?
It was great. It was really good. A lot of food, a lot of meat, grilling.
Yeah.
Pretty hot, but
so was it like when you guys have an event? Is it like the big extended family, or is this more like your family, as in more immediate?
It really just depends. Sometimes we get together. This past Sunday was immediate family, and there's been some times where it's extended family. It's my wife's family and my family combined.
You get those two
aunts and
combined
uncles,
together?
Cousins, yes. Sometimes it's a huge event.
Because that was something that was always weird for me. Like when I was growing up, the two families never really merged, like it was always like we always had two separate birthday parties. There was one for my mom's side of the family. There was one for my dad's side of the family. And it was always weird for me when there would be something that was big enough to draw all of them together. Like when my uncle got married, my grandma was there because I think he got married at her church. Okay. Or obviously if there was, a death and we had to go to a funeral and the other side of the family was, showing support by being there and stuff. And it was always weird to me growing up when, these two sides of the family were interacting. I'm like, I don't like this. This is weird. Because that's not what I was used to. It was always just these two completely separate aspects. And it was interesting too because kind of the way that I was raised, it's two vastly different. I don't really want to say outlooks, but just two different backgrounds. Like my dad's side of the family, I don't want to say redneck, but very outdoorsy. I mean, there's some side of that family that's, I'm not gonna lie, it's fucking white trash. Like it is. There's some. Thankfully, they're more extended, but like they're further out there. But for the most part, his family, really really good people. They're more outdoorsy, camping, hunting, all of that stuff, sports, things like that. Whereas my mom's side of the family was more of the artsy kind. That was the one where her older sister started a restaurant down in downtown Portland, which is still there, by the way. It's called the Bijou Cafe. So if you're ever in Portland, go hit it up. And it was just always kind of that I got to be raised with both aspects of that. I guess is kind of what I'm getting at here, is that I not only had this one side that was more sports, outdoors, stuff like that, and then this other one that was more kind of the art aspect of it. So I appreciate that, being able to be raised in an environment like that, because it kind of opened me up to both of these worlds, which was kind of cool. Frank says they say "daggum" a lot. I don't know. I don't really talk to him because when I was a kid, my dad specifically told me, he was like, "There's some parts of this family. If they were to show up here and ask to stay the night, they wouldn't be allowed in the house because they're so sketchy. Like you don't know, and you know what? Like we almost never saw those people. When we do, it was at a random funeral, and even then, growing older, like when you see these people, it was like, oh, that's why Dad doesn't want me to be around them. That's why we don't acknowledge that part of the family. It's like, well, to each their own, I guess. But when most of them are in jail, maybe that's a hint that you might want to pick up on at some point. But anyway, we'll leave it at that on this episode of the AfterBuzz as I bash my family, which is always a fun time here on the AfterBuzz. But on that note, big thank you again to producer Dave. Another belated Happy Father's Day to you, my good friend. And again, if you guys have anything that you want brought up, Frank says the smell of brute and leather. What's wrong with the smell of brute and leather, man? I used to wear brute. Of course, I was 12, and that's just because, like, I think the reason I like it because that's what my grandfather wore. And you know how you always relate smells to certain things?
Uh-huh.
Like, I liked that because it reminded me of my grandfather. And he was still alive at this point. Like, he hadn't passed away yet. But it was before I was even shaving and stuff. And I would put a little brute on. So I was just a little 12-year-old that smelled like an old man. But anyway, on that note, again, if there's anything that you guys want brought up here on the AfterBuzz, if it's a question about the show, it's a question about this show, anything at all, you can always hit me up at brandon@buzzadamshow.com. Reminder, make sure you guys are hitting the like button down below. I'd appreciate that. You're hitting the notification button so you know when we go live. You're hitting the bell. And then also, if you feel so inclined, share this. Put it out there on Facebook. Put it in the world. Really quick update on Rockstar 101. I edited a new episode last week. It's still not up yet. I'm not sure what the hell's going on there. But I'll get with Shim. And this is the problem is that it's now 5:25. Is it 6 or 8 hours? See, this is why it's so damn confusing. It's either 5:30 in the morning on Thursday there already, or it's 3:30 in the morning on Thursday over there. That's why it's really difficult to do this stuff. But there is one that's already done. It just hasn't been uploaded yet. So we got to figure out kind of what's going on there. Maybe just some miscommunication. So we'll pop that bad boy up there. And this is the one where we talk about grunge. It's a great episode because this is where I find out Alice in Chains didn't make it big down in Australia. Like I give him the big four: Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Nirvana, and Pearl Jam. And if you have to take one, which one's it going to be? And he starts out by telling me, he's like, Alice in Chains never made it big down here. Like on the radio stations down there, you hear Rooster and Man in the Box. That's it. So it's really, really a good conversation there. And then we go really, I don't know about political, but maybe a little bit in another episode that I'm going to be editing later today. It's going to be a really good one too. So check that out. That's Rockstar 101. You can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. But as of now, have yourselves a fantastic Wednesday. Again, a big thank you to producer Dave, as he's doing this always for free, by the way. Like he's not paid to be here. He's doing this out of the kindness of his heart. So on that note, have yourselves a fantastic Wednesday. We'll see you guys next week, same time, and also tomorrow morning, bright and early for the Buzz Adams Morning Show at 5 a.m. Mountain Time.